So every time you open an app, watch the news, or just scroll through an article, you are constantly bombarded with these bold headlines. You know the ones: a new study shows, or data reveals that. But how often do you actually stop and ask yourself, how do we know what we know? Like, how are these studies and data points actually built from the ground up? Think of every piece of research you've ever read as a house. You can't just throw some wood and nails together and expect the whole thing to stand, right? You need a solid, meticulously planned research blueprint.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to entirely demystify the exact tools researchers use to discover the truth. We're looking at the blueprint of discovery and breaking down the actual architecture of research methods. By the end of our time together, you'll be able to look at literally any study and understand exactly how its foundation was poured. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the blueprint of discovery, move into surveys, explore experiments, tackle qualitative methods, and then finish up with the trust test.
Starting with Section 1, the blueprint of discovery.
Before anyone even starts collecting data, researchers face this massive choice. Are we measuring numbers or are we interpreting meaning? Quantitative research is all about those objective numbers. It tests theories deductively, and the variables are tightly controlled to isolate specific facts. Qualitative research, on the other hand, relies on text and image data. Instead of hard numbers, it's focusing on the subjective meanings of the participants. The researcher gets out there, gathers data in a natural setting, and builds themes inductively from the ground up. Basically, it's the difference between counting exactly how many people bought a coffee versus asking them how that coffee actually made them feel.
Moving to Section 2, surveys, measuring the masses. Surveys are literally how researchers take the pulse of massive groups of people. A survey design provides a quantitative or numeric description of trends, attitudes, or opinions of a population. Now, because analyzing an entire population is almost never feasible, researchers meticulously extract a sample. And from those targeted sample results, they make statistical generalizations about the broader group. To make sure this foundation isn't structurally biased, researchers rely on a few really specific tools. First, they figure out if the survey is cross-sectional, meaning it's capturing data at just one single snapshot in time, or longitudinal, which tracks data over a longer period. Next is random sampling. This is absolutely crucial. It means every single individual in the population has an equal probability of being selected, which gives us the mathematical backing to actually generalize our results. And then there's stratification. This guarantees that specific demographic characteristics, like maybe gender or income levels, are proportionally represented in the sample, exactly as they appear out there in the true population.
All right, Section 3, experiments, controlling the chaos.
So, if surveys observe what's already there, experiments isolate variables to find direct cause and effect. But there is a huge difference between a true experiment and a quasi-experiment. In a true experiment, individuals are randomly assigned to groups to eliminate bias. But let's be honest, the real world is messy. Often researchers are forced to use convenient pre-existing groups, like an intact classroom of students or a specific hospital ward. When investigators use control and experimental groups, but do not randomly assign those participants, that is what we call a quasi-experiment.
Let's actually walk through how an experiment is built step by step, using a really rigorous 6-step procedure from Borg and Gall for matched pairs. Step 1, you administer a pretest. Step 2, you create matched pairs of participants based on those scores, so you pair up the high scores, the medium scores, and so on. Step 3, you take one member from each of those pairs and randomly assign them to either the experimental or the control group. Step 4, you expose only the experimental group to the treatment. Step 5, everyone takes a post-test. And finally, Step 6, you compare the performance using statistics. It's a beautifully logical, tightly controlled sequence.
Which brings us to Section 4, qualitative methods, peeling the onion.
Sometimes numbers just can't fully answer the question, right? When that happens, we shift to a route where the researcher themselves becomes the ultimate measuring instrument. Qualitative researchers use an incredibly diverse set of tools to gather data directly from natural settings. They take unstructured field notes through observations. They conduct open-ended interviews, face-to-face or in focus groups to really capture the participants' direct views. They dive into private documents like personal journals or public ones like meeting minutes. And they even use audio-visual materials like photographs or videotapes. They are basically constantly gathering massive amounts of text and image data.
So what on earth do they do with all that messy human data? Well, this brilliantly illustrates it. Qualitative data analysis is a process of moving deeper and deeper into understanding the data, peeling back the layers of an onion.
You aren't just plugging numbers into a neat little formula here, you are systematically searching for deep meaning.
And here is exactly how that inductive coding process works. First, you organize and prepare the raw data, typing up transcripts, scanning images, the whole shebang. Second, you just read through everything to get a general sense of the tone and the big ideas. Third, you begin coding the data, which really just means you're organizing the material into targeted chunks or text segments. Fourth, you use those codes to generate rich descriptions and major themes. Fifth, you represent those findings in a compelling narrative passage. And finally, step 6, you interpret the larger meaning, asking, okay, what were the actual lessons learned here?
Final stop, section 5, the trust test. Validity.
Look, a blueprint is completely useless if the house collapses the second the wind blows. Researchers absolutely must prove their structure is solid. In experimental, quantitative research, we contrast two major types of validity to test this. First up is internal validity. This asks, are we absolutely sure the experimental treatment caused the outcome and not some other random factor? Basically, is the inside of the house stable? External validity, however, asks, can we safely generalize these results to other people, to other settings, or to future situations? In other words, is this exact same blueprint going to work if we try to build the house in another neighborhood?
Let's look at the termites that can slowly ruin a perfectly good scientific study. These are the real threats to internal validity. First is history, where a random external event influences the outcome right in the middle of the experiment. Then there's maturation. Participants naturally change or age over time, which totally affects results. Consider regression, where participants with extreme scores naturally drift back toward the average anyway. We also have to watch out for selection, meaning there are pre-existing differences in the groups before you even got started. Mortality is simply participants dropping out of the study. And finally, diffusion. This is when your control group and your experimental group actually talk to each other and share the treatment. Researchers literally have to meticulously design their studies to stop all of these threats.
But hey, qualitative researchers have their own unique trust tests to make sure their onion peeling is accurate. They triangulate data, which basically means using multiple, completely different sources of information to back up a single theme. They use member checking, where they actually take their findings right back to the participants and ask, hey, did I get this right? They rely on rich, thick descriptions to practically transport the reader directly into the setting. They clarify their own researcher bias up front so everyone understands their background. And they purposely present negative or discrepant information that runs counter to their themes, because real life is inherently messy and it doesn't always fit perfectly into a neat little box.
So, there you have it. We've walked through the complete blueprint. You've seen how surveys sample massive populations, how experiments control the chaos, how qualitative methods dig for that deep meaning, and how validity tests keep the whole structure standing. I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you're scrolling on your phone and you see a headline screaming about a groundbreaking new study, stop for a second and ask yourself, how was this built? Was it a massive quantitative survey or a targeted qualitative focus group? Did they actually control the variables? And ultimately, will its blueprint pass your trust test? Keep that critical eye open, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.